I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. In many discussions that I have with those of you who are looking at moving to Nicaragua, one of the things that comes up a lot, both for those who are just looking from abroad and those who are here visiting as tourists, is you often decide that you're interested in buying land long before you're looking at moving here. The idea being, of course, that if you get in now, you have an opportunity to get it before the land disappears, have land that you can hold for a long time, and sometime far in the future, potentially, or maybe relatively soon in the future, that you'll be able to go out and build a house or a plantation or a farm or whatever it is that you're interested in on said land. There's a lot of pressure behind this from the way that we view the world and the way that we see things moving. We're sure that buying land now is a great way to protect ourselves for the future. Is that true? Is it true in general? Is it true here in Nicaragua? Well, we're going to talk about that right after the bump. We talk on the show a lot about how when people are on vacation or when you're looking at paradise online, you get this reaction that you're going to want to buy a house. And if you don't want to buy a house, you want to buy land so you can have a house in the future. It gives us a feeling of stability. We want to be attached to a place that we dream of being. And it may be a place you visit all the time, so you have a really strong social attachment to it, or it may just be that you're looking online and you see how beautiful it is in Nicaragua, and you say, wow, I could afford to potentially have a lot here, and that will protect me so that sometime in the future I can build a house. And obviously that would give you some protection, right? So it's a very natural thing for people to feel, and it's a dangerous one because we know that this is something that happens to basically all people. Real estate is something that we got a lot of wind right now. Just hopefully it doesn't affect the show. People are emotionally tied to buying real estate. That's a general thing. People are always in a position where they say, well, I want to own a house because I want financial security, I want protection, I want stability. And houses don't actually provide those things, but they do provide an emotional sense of those things. And that's important to understand, that people are not very logical. They don't run math on these things. They don't do a deep analysis. They simply know that it feels a certain way, and they know that salespeople use that and repeat it and really reinforce it. And the combination gives this, well, everyone tells me, and of course everyone else is doing the same thing. So you have this group think going on where everyone's like, well, yes, owning property of course protects you, but when you run the math over a lifetime, it doesn't actually add up. When you actually look at properties, and you can do a lot of analysis on this, they basically track inflation when averaged over time. You get bubbles, you get collapses, you have all kinds of things. So there are ways to invest and make money on real estate, but in general, when people are simply buying real estate, they're on average not winning or losing, right? It is more or less a steady state. The idea that real estate is a guaranteed winner when it comes to investing is a complete and utter myth. Everyone who is selling you property and makes a commission or somehow makes money by getting you to buy something, of course, is going to go out of their way to try to convince you. And it's an easy thing to convince you of. But if you actually look at the math, it doesn't hold up. People who actually do it obviously aren't magically winning all kinds of money, or everyone would try to do it. People who are in the know often avoid real estate. It's a very risky thing. You really have to know what you're doing. The winners of it are people who handle the transactions, right? Real estate agents and brokers get a percentage simply by other people buying and selling things. They don't have to worry about if the market goes up or down. That doesn't really impact them dramatically. Sometimes a market going down actually benefits them. If houses turn over twice as fast but cost 50% less, they still make more in most cases. They may have to do a little bit more footwork for it, but they're able to do so with greater density of time, right? So there's a lot of benefits for them simply by having a highly liquid market. When you come to a place like Nicaragua, of course, getting land seems like it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of pressure put on people. Some of it is pressure we have from where we grow up, right? In the United States, people are buying land pretty generally. In Canada, even more so. People are desperate to get land because the prices are going through the roof. There's probably going to be a bubble that will collapse, but we will see. But the idea that cities like Toronto were cheap when we were kids and expensive now, that's real. Certain areas have changed quite dramatically. However, there is a lot of people wondering, is that actually sustainable? Will that be true into the future? That we don't know, right? But if you're coming from North America, there is this very strong emotions and things that we are taught that buying land is always a good idea, even though it obviously is not, right? It just takes basic common sense, basic math, and you say, wow, it can't actually change in any dramatic way. Land, because of what it is, must be a general reflection of the economy. Now, it can vary a little bit, but on average, it has to essentially reflect the economy outside of isolated areas. So because of that, we can rule out the idea that simply investing in land on its own is a good idea. Now, investing in anything when we aren't going to use it right away is always a bit of a problem. If you invest in anything that doesn't generate value, you have something that you may lose, and you have the lack of your money generating value for you. So just buying empty land that you're not going to build on, now if you're going to own a house and live in it, that has completely different math, right? And people use that math, this is the house I live in, to then justify this is a place where I may someday have a house that I live in. And that's dangerous on its own, because when you're going to live in a house, you can say, well, I would have paid $500 in rent. Now I'm paying $600 in mortgage, but I eventually own the house. Okay, that might be good math. Right, but if you have an empty lot that you're paying for, now, of course, that's not as expensive as a house, but let's say you're going to buy a lot and you hope in 10 years to live there. And sure, the lot is $10,000 today, and it may be $20,000 in 10 years. Well, if we were to invest our money, it would double during that time. So you're not actually saving on the property during that. It's just tracking inflation, right? And it probably won't turn from 10 to 20, right? Chances are if you invest your money, it will grow faster than the property will go up, probably by quite a bit. But that's the general math, right? Is you will make more money by doing good, stable investments that are predictable, like index funds, than you'll get holding on to empty land. Now, if you are a speculator and you manage to get the perfect land that's going to go up and no one else knew about it and it wasn't priced based on that, then you could be a winner, right? But you got to be the expert in that case, not a casual outside observer. If you're a foreigner in Nicaragua, you are not that expert. Point blank. None of us are. The Nicaraguans, sometimes 1% of the Nicaraguans may be able to speculate like that. We as foreigners cannot, right? You're up against people who are all in the same boat as you, right? Which is a very unknowledgeable one. Same as me. So we can't be that, right? But for every person who's making money, they have to make it off of someone. Someone has to lose for you to win on average. That's just how a closed market like real estate is going to work. So we don't have a good ability to just buy and hold and have that make money on its own. We have to make money some other way, right, on average. But when we own land and hold on to it, we take on risks. We have risks of 10 years of what if my lifestyle changes? What if the laws change? What if my country doesn't let me move? What if this country doesn't let me move there? What if I decide another country is the right country for me? What if I do move to this country but decide that isn't the plot of land I want to be on, or it's not the city I want to be in? What if the town around it grows up and becomes a much busier place than I wanted to be in? Or what if everyone abandons that location and no one wants to be there, right? Lots of things change in 10 years, a lot of things, right? And this could be 1 year in the future, 20 years in the future, and your cone of uncertainty will vary, but the idea is very simple. The closer you are to actually doing something with property, the more you're going to have knowledge about it. And investing in empty land way ahead of time carries a lot of risks. Now, I'll use a perfect example. My grandparents, before I was born, bought a reasonably priced $5,000 piece of land in Texas. And their hope was that sometime in the future, they were from Ohio, that either they would want to move to it or they'd be able to sell it. They were land speculators in this one isolated case. It was a weird thing to do. I have no idea what drove them to do it, and they didn't tell anyone about it, I'm assuming out of embarrassment. So my grandparents bought this piece of land in El Paso for $5,000 in something like 1960. They were really hoping that this $5,000 investment would, who knows, right? I really don't know what they were thinking, because they lived in Ohio and they couldn't watch over it. So they had to trust that nothing happened to it. Of course, something happened to it. I don't know what happened to it. All I know is that when it came down to their wills, nobody got it. It was gone, right? Whether we had squatters on it, someone had sold it again and no one had checked in on it, whether we just couldn't find it, who knows? But because we weren't using that land and it was long forgotten, it simply became something we didn't have access to anymore. Now, it was a tiny investment from long ago. It was still worthless. We did look into it and the land didn't go up in value. It was completely worthless land that no one wanted to buy. So it didn't matter that we had lost access to it. It had lost all of its value. But had that same $5,000 been put into an index fund on its own in 1960, by the time my grandparents passed away, it would have been worth in excess, most likely, or very close to $250,000. That's not nothing. that could have been a massive nest egg that they had already forgotten, that they could have passed on to their children and grandchildren, that would have been very noticeable, even split up amongst all the kids. That would have been an amount of money that we would have really noticed as value. It would have changed everybody's lives. All of us could have taken it and invested and had our retirements completely handled by that one investment when they were young, right? But they didn't. They did this weird thing with it. Now, people do lots of weird things with all their money, right? Everyone does that, right? I'm not like, why did my grandparents do this? The point being, what if you're a land seller, the thing that everyone says, this is so safe, it's so smart, it's so easy to come up with examples of, oh wait, tons of people who do this lose their land. Tons of people who do this have the land drop in value. Tons of people don't go from $5,000 to $300,000 during the time they hold it. They go from $5,000 to $20,000 and call it a big win, but they don't compare it against what their money would have done with no effort some other way. So they could have had all this money, but no matter what they did, they lost about $300,000 on the deal by the time that they passed away, and never got anything out of it, right? So that's a dramatic example, but extrapolate that to, well, I'm going to go invest in some land for 10 years. After that 10 years, you've probably lost value on the land. That's the most likely thing because you're not there dealing with it. You probably have to maintain that land, right? Are you going to like cut down the shrubbery? Are you going to make sure it doesn't become overgrown? Are you going to, who knows? Now, maybe you've got some land. You're like, I really don't care. It's jungle now. It's going to be jungle then. Okay. Something that people really don't think about when we're here in Nicaragua, this is a phenomenon that comes up here. When you're talking about like buying a beautiful summer home in Italy, or you're just thinking of doing things in other countries, we tend to do things very differently. So my family is part Italian. We have seriously considered buying a villa in Italy, not a big like fancy villa, like a little tiny thing in an old town. Cheap, right? But we've thought about doing that, and some of the advantages are it's a standing house. There's nothing to maintain, right? There's no yard, there's no gates, there's no, like, just a little village house in the midst of things. Very low price. Getting in on a low in the market, a place that we know we want to use. We have some villages picked out. Right, there's all this stuff, makes it very easy. And we don't really have to worry about anything happening to it because we can lock it up tight and monitor it quite easily. And it's really easy for us to fly over, check on things, make sure everything's good. But what if we did the same in reverse? What if we bought a plot of land in Nicaragua? Well, a bunch of things are different. One, we're talking about land, not houses. This is one of the things that's very different about just the way that people tend to look at things. If we were looking at a little tiny city apartment or city house in León or in Managua, and we had internet on and electric on, and we had cameras in the house, and we had it all locked up so it was like a fortress, just like these old stone houses in Italy, then you could have a really high assurance that nothing bad was going on with that house. And if it was, you could call the police, call a neighbor, have someone go deal with it until you could get there, right? Not too big of a deal, relatively low risk. Still risk, but relatively low risk. But if you flip it, you say, we're going to get some land, and I own land in Nicaragua, right? What do we have to do? Well, because we have land that we're not living on, we have to pay someone to live on that land. And that may sound crazy, but if we don't pay someone to live there, it's just empty land. Who's going to keep an eye on it? Nobody, right? So somebody's going to go out and move on to that land and squat on it. And because it's open land and not a closed house, there's no breaking and entering. There's no reason they can't be there. Now, I can go chase them off because it's my land, but I don't know they're there. I can't have internet running to an empty piece of land. I can't have cameras covering all the land, not realistically, right? And so at the end, someone could be living there 99% of the time. I could go to check on it. I could send people to check on it. They could watch for someone to come check, and they go hide and just keep coming back, right? And they establish themselves there for a long time. And at the last second, they put up some structures. And then when I go to move onto the land, they're like, whoa, 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 we've been here for X amount of time. We've done improvements. We own this land, right? And it's not because Nicaragua has loose squatter laws. It is very much the opposite. Their laws are very tough on squatters. But the behavior of how people are thinking of investing in land and stuff here is just different. When people talk about buying a house in America, or getting a lake house in the United States, or getting a little village house in Europe as a second house, a couple things are different. One, very few people do this. Mostly people are talking about moving and going and having a primary house. Second, no one is ever discussing the idea of buying a place years or decades before they would actually move there. 3, they're always talking about pre-built structures that they're able to get a deal on. It's very rare to talk about empty land or half-empty land, right? Like old rundown houses that are, you know, not really secure. Well, it's there, but it's on this land, and we're going to wipe it all down, or we're going to completely rebuild it, or whatever. Right? The way that people think about investing in Nicaragua, the way that they think about buying early here is very different, just on average. And so because of that, we have this problem that so many foreigners, and I mean so many, there's entire regions of the country that are just empty lots that have been empty for decades because tons of Americans or Canadians came in and bought speculatively lots of small lots, but all together, and nobody decided to get the momentum going and start moving in. So you ended up with whole zones that sold for pretty high amounts of money that are completely worthless today. There's not even a manner in which to buy them, let alone someone who'd be foolish enough to do so. If you buy there, you have no municipalities, you have HOAs that you don't have control of, you have empty neighbors' lots that are dangerous because it's huge empty areas that no one can do anything to improve because technically someone owns it. It's a mess, right? So because of this, you don't see this. I've never been to another country where this happens. Obviously it does, but it's very rare. But here in Nicaragua, it happens quite often. So you have this really high risk of people buying land and leaving it for years or literally decades without even coming to look at it, often forgetting that they have it. Like my grandparents with their spot in El Paso, they didn't know where it was at the end. They forgot that they had it. It was out of their minds completely, and they just never considered it, right? Someone could have been squatting there for 50 years. We wouldn't have known, literally. So that kind of thing can happen here, and because it's so easy, because people do this so much, everybody's looking for it. So many Nicaraguans look for foreigners to buy land or whatever and not do anything with it. They know within a few months that that is essentially abandoned. Their chances of squatting on it and having that turn out in their favor become pretty high. Again, they may have to go for a really long time. They've got to do improvements. There's all kinds of rules, and they're always afraid of getting caught and then kicked off, and then they're going to do something. But it's so easy to hop walls. It's when you're in Europe or the United States, it's so easy to be monitored, to have your neighbors be like, hey, someone's going over the wall over there, or there's a person living in this abandoned house, or this, like, there's just more density. But when you're here in Nicaragua, there are so few communications channels between, like, oh, this person came and visited, we don't know who they are, they bought that empty lot over there maybe, but we don't really know because we don't know them, and now one of our neighbors, not someone we know, seems to be living over there, but they probably know that guy because we don't know that guy. Like, there's just so... if you live here, it's instantly obvious why it becomes a problem. But when trying to explain it to someone from another culture, they're like, well, wouldn't someone notice? No, that's not reasonable. Well, can't you just put up a wall? If anything, that may make it worse. Now you have less visibility, so it's easier for them to hop the wall, set something up, and have nobody notice, right? It's seriously, this is a thing. There's a reason no Nicaraguan and no expat who lives here would ever buy land like this ahead of time. But foreigners who are coming in and visiting, who think they're going to move or are just here as tourists, immediately are convinced that it's a thing to do and will make any argument to try to create a reason to justify it, right? Well, at first, I'm worried about the land disappearing. Well, this makes sense, right? Except Nicaragua is in a market collapse. We have so much real estate available that, yes, it is theoretically possible that you find a perfect spot and you don't want to lose it and it's the one spot you want to be in. But that is so unlikely. We have so much, whether it's mountains or city or coastline, it doesn't matter. We have so much of it available, so much more than you think, at such a tiny fraction of the price that you're convinced that it is. And you just have unlimited possibilities, and the market has been going down year after year after year after year after year after year after year. Right? It is not where it was 10 years ago. It is certainly not where it was 8 years ago, and it continues on a slide. And with current events as they are, it's sliding even more, not less. And everyone has some reason that they're sure that will not be true in the future. And let's hope that that's true. For the Nicaraguan people, we want to see the market rebound. But is it realistically going to rebound? No, we don't have any factor, especially no highway being built factor on the horizon that could possibly move the needle. Right? And everyone has this, well, they got this project going on, that project going on. One, you don't know what those projects are really going to do. Two, the information you have about them, I guarantee, is misinformation. The amount of misinformation. And every time someone tells me, well, I heard about this thing, and then they describe what they heard, I'm like, okay, have you looked at a map, or have you considered if that is actually physically possible? Oh, right. the things that people are being sold from abroad or from brokers or from real estate agents to create false pressure to need to buy things are extreme. We don't have anything on the horizon that is expected to give Nicaragua a boost in its real estate. We do have things we hope in time will slowly turn the market around and have a healthy organic rebound. That is something we hope for, mostly through the solid continuing growth of our economy, which is happening. That's fantastic. The opportunities for Nicaraguans who stay and don't leave is increasing. So we're seeing good things happen, but those are not things that is going to make a bubble happen overnight. We're talking about a long time, a lot of economic change has to happen for there to be a rebound, because we have an entire market that is for sale. There's no liquidity. The prices are incredibly low. It's just, this is extreme, and people are not understanding it. And because people are anxious to buy and are sure they don't need to know the market at all, we have a certain number of people who just constantly come in and keep looking and don't realize that the entire mechanism of selling properties is all set up for them. All the locals know, if you see a price, chop the last number off. That's going to be closer to the actual price that they're looking for than the asking price. Asking prices mean essentially nothing. Right? And until you've lived here long enough that you have close enough friends that you can get insider scoops on what people are actually paying, and then realize that they're in the same boat as you and probably got screwed, and they're paying 1/5 what you were about to pay, and they probably got screwed, and there's someone laughing at them for paying 5 times what they should have paid, you really need to open your eyes and say, oh my gosh, the amount that we're being misled by prices, by demand, by all these things is so extreme. I cannot possibly convey the degree to which foreigners are misled about the market value of property in Nicaragua, about the pressures, about the style, about everything that's going on. There is no movement. There's not going to be movement. And everyone is convinced. But in the future, right, everyone, once you start giving this fear, uncertainty, doubt, what if suddenly millions of people move into Nicaragua and start buying property? Come on. That's not going to happen. So what we have is just loads of risk that we face by buying property early. Personal risk, financial risk, investment risk, change in the environment risk, all kinds of things. And what we don't have is any kind of solid reason for which we would buy early. Maybe a few months early, of course, right? Oh, I'd like to get this land. I'd like to get it all finalized. I want to have it, be able to do surveys and have lots of leisure time before I have to start construction. No problem. But when you're buying land without solid plans, when you're not ready to move forward, when you don't have the finances to move forward, putting your finances into land is generally, in any world, a bad idea, unless you have a really good speculative reason to do. Otherwise, it is not a wise move. Doing so in a country where it is especially the worst move you could imagine, it is what it is, right? There's few places. If you've ever said, well, some places are good for investing and some are not, it is not in this case for this is extreme. Now, it is true. If you're going to buy a house here, there are cases where you could get really good value. But we keep saying there's no liquidity on the market. Be prepared. Everyone I know who is buying good houses is taking decades, plural, to be able to sell them. By the time they've actually sold them, they've lost so much money. No matter how you try to spin it, they're losing tons of money, right? And when you have to pay someone to live on your land, when you have a risk of someone damaging or stealing your land, when you have the risk that you're not going to actually want to live there, when it's 90% chance that the value over time of the land is going to decrease, not increase, when there's a 99% chance that any increase won't be enough to actually make it have been worth any risk that you took, when you don't know if you're really going to still have the exact same desires by the time comes, or that new opportunities may not have come up. There's so many reasons that buying ahead is dangerous, that it is bad for you, that it is not going to meet any of your needs, versus the essentially no value to it should be a slam dunk. What happens though, and we talk about this a lot on the show, is humans are emotional. We get the idea that we want to invest, we want to own land, it makes us feel connected to the country or something like that. And so because we emotionally want to do that, our brains start trying on their own, not with us consciously doing this, trying to find reasons to justify doing that thing. Right? When I want a new laptop and I don't need one, my brain is like, well, you might be able to work faster. The battery will last longer. You'll look cooler. Maybe your clients will more likely hire you because you have a better laptop. Obviously, that's not true. But my brain starts saying it, right? It starts coming up with, maybe you'll be more efficient and it'll make up for the cost of the laptop. Yeah, right. but that's what my brain's going to do. And the same thing's going to happen. If you start looking at land, this is why we say do not look at land, right? You can't. It doesn't matter, because I know I'm talking to humans, therefore this is true. Your brain will not be able to resist having looked at land or houses or whatever. It will start imagining you in those houses, and it will start making you want those houses or one like them or some other place, and you will start rationalizing really, really obviously bad decisions. We will all do this. When you start watching real estate shows, when you start looking at real estate listings online, when you drive around and start looking at what's for sale, you've made a conscious decision to trigger a subconscious, illogical undermining of your safety and protections, and you guarantee that you are going to start down a path. Maybe you can resist it, but probably you can't. It will start to make you want to justify buying something. Okay, that is going to happen. When you start looking, you've made the decision to abandon rationality and to stop good decision making at that point. Now, if you're actually going out to buy and you know you're going to buy, right, obviously you have to start looking. But if you start looking when you're not doing that, when you're just, I'm just going to get an idea, you are creating this problem consciously. And so that's why I tell people don't do it. And so that way, when people say, well, I did this and now, but I think this is a good price. What do you think of this? I can say, you did the thing I said you not to do. And since you did, now I have no way to protect you, because your brain is now in full on defense mode. And this is, everybody does this. I can point out this price is 2 to 10 times what it should be. And immediately, well, but it's got this beautiful view, or it's in this great location, or it's going to go up in time. Why would you think that? Well, and they don't know why they thought that, because they didn't actually think that. That was their brain being defensive. And then, well, it's got to come up with a thing. This will change in the future because of a new law in Canada. There's going to be 1 million people flooding into Nicaragua, and we know this to be true. So we know that there's going to be so many tourists, and so it must be expensive. Well, that law isn't real. Someone just said that. It's not going to make people flood into Nicaragua. That's illogical. Lots of tourists. Are you kidding? There's no tourists here in this country. Even if we 10 times it, it's not going to move the needle. Like, these are not logical underpinnings of that, but this is what our brains do, right? We know when we started looking at the property, this is where our brain was eventually going to go, right? And we're all going to do this. So that's the risk, is that if we start looking, we are going to start creating excuses for ourselves to try to make it sound reasonable to invest in land. I can tell you, I have never met a person who went out and bought. Now, investing in land where you're like, I'm a land speculator and I'm calculating the land, and that is the goal, is different. When we're talking about people who are like, someday I'd like to build a house, or I would just like to have land to feel anchored to the country. Every single person I've ever heard of who've done something like that, including buying a house that they someday want to live in, have always been sad by the end. It was always, they ended up at great risk, ended up with tons of costs they weren't expecting, ended up losing the property, ended up not understanding what they had done, ended up not wanting to be in the place that they thought they had wanted to be in. There's so many things to have changed. It always goes wrong. And if you think about it logically, if you really step back and say, do I today want to, without being able to use it, want to make one of the greatest, most unchangeable life decisions that I could possibly make? I'm going to invest. And worse, most people doing this also invest 5 to 10 times the value. So for a lot of us, right, you could say, well, would you invest in land in Nicaragua? And we hear, would you spend $5,000 to $10,000 to get a nice big plot in a really good spot and have this? And we think, man, that seems like a bad idea, but I mean, I could kind of be talked into it. But then when you're talking to the people who are actually doing this, they may be thinking hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? At least many times what we're thinking. And so when we're thinking $5,000 to $10,000, we're thinking, well, within 10 years, I could probably unload it and not lose more than, $1,000, maybe even make a few bucks. I could take a little bit of risk on that because we know that the risk is very small. But when someone's looking and saying, oh, look at this tiny plot of land, it's $100,000. I'll take a chance on that. That's much more of a major factor in your life, tying up those kinds of resources rather than $5,000 or $10,000. That's 10 to 20 times, right? But that's actually what's happening. So I think one of the factors is that future expats look at current expats, and we say things like, oh, I might buy this piece of land. I might. And then they say, I might buy a land right next to you. And we're like, yes, we got this place for $5,000. They're like, yes, I got this place for, wait, I paid $50,000. What do you mean you paid $5,000? Why did you only pay $5,000? And we say, because that's too much, but that's what I was able to talk them down to because I was getting gringo priced. Why did you pay so much? Well, I looked at real estate websites and they all had this extra zero on them, right? These are processes that happen over and over and over, and your agent, your broker, your marketing people, your locals who deal with foreigners know that this emotional things happen, and they will all play you for it. And this is something really important to understand. Every expat around you who owns land, whether it's someone who also got screwed by doing the same kind of thing, or someone like me who simply is an investor and has paid relatively reasonable amounts for property, we all have the same factor under the hood, and that is that we make money if you overpay. If you and several of your friends dramatically overpay in any given market, it makes it easier for us to trick someone into overpaying for our land as well. So if we want to unload at a profit, or we just want to protect ourselves and have the option of unloading without losing a bunch of money, we depend on people making these mistakes. And so you have a non-trivial, a completely massive financial incentive for every single investor, every landowner, every house owner, every person who has bought in any way whatsoever. They have a huge financial incentive to get you to pay the same wrong prices or to pay higher than they did. They do not have a financial incentive to help you out and to be like, you know what, I overpaid by a huge amount, you should not pay that, because that means they're admitting to their own failures, and which is very difficult for humans to do. And also, they're completely devastating the value of their own property. This is why, you know, we got properties down the beach, we got places that are advertising $180,000 to $250,000, but the people who are actually there on the ground are like desperate to take $40,000 because everybody, right, the people who haven't sold yet are desperate for no one to find out that 40,000 isn't the moving number yet, right? The value is something below that. And the people who are offering 40 outright are like, we just got to get out of here, right? So who knows how low the market will actually go? But the availability, like all these factors, right? You have to think about all the different people who are involved, all of their incentives, empathize a little bit, and suddenly it becomes really clear when you really take into account the whole market that this is not like North America, and the values of the property are so far off, and the ability to mislead someone who's coming in temporarily and getting emotionally drawn in, which is exactly what happens, right? There's no logical reason to be looking at property before you've lived here for a long time. None. Right? You shouldn't even be looking. And that's why we make so many videos saying never look early. Don't look. Opening the website is making the decision. Watching the TV show, making the decision. Calling the real estate agent, made the decision. Locked in, right? I want to be taken down the garden path. Take me, right? That decision is made. And everybody wants to think that isn't a decision. That's just fact finding. That is not how the human brain works. Once you are doing these things, your brain starts to do a number of very dangerous things. One, it starts to crave owning that property. As soon as you start looking at property, you want to have some. Once you start looking at prices, even if you know they're fake, you start to build a false sense of value around the property. Once you see people telling you that property is in demand, even if you know it's not, you start to believe that it is. And part of the reason that your brain does this is because it knows you made a decision. You talked to that real estate agent, you looked at that website, you started checking out land, you started dreaming about these places that you could own, and by doing so, your brain knows that you consciously want this to be the answer, and that makes sense. We know that that's true, and so it starts creating frameworks to make this possible for you. It starts making excuses. It starts building information, and anytime that we look at information intentionally, our brain starts to process it. We can't realistically look at misinformation over and over again and consciously tell ourselves, okay, I'm going to look at this information, but I'm not going to ingest it. Our brain just keeps ingesting. And so an important part of stopping lying to yourself is to not lie to yourself in the first place, not to just tell yourself you're going to lie, so don't listen, but don't listen at all. It's a lot like wanting to be on a diet, but instead of avoiding food and maybe exercising, intentionally going out and looking at menus and recipes and going by restaurants and going, well, I'm just going to resist, but I'm going to keep looking in the window, and intentionally seeking out information where people are telling you that there's some diet program where you can just eat and eat and eat and it doesn't matter. And if you keep watching that stuff, eventually you're going to be like, I'm just going to have a little bit, then I'll have a little bit more. And we all know how that you fall off the wagon when it's a diet. Well, this is the same thing. You're tempting yourself. You're feeding misinformation. You're setting yourself up to not have a framework. And it's really easy and tempting because you want these things to be true. As much as that doesn't make sense, right? It seems like the things that I'm saying, the information I'm giving you, is really ideal. There's no reason to worry. There's no reason to rush. There's no reason to spend very much money. In most cases, things are cheap and widely available. It couldn't realistically be better for you. I mean, sure, it could always be free or something, but that's about it. Everything is so cheap and so much is available. How could you realistically be better? But because that answer means that the smart thing to do is to research, figure out what the real price is, and buy the thing that actually makes sense for you, it requires, and this is the thing that people don't have, patience. You will get your best options by being patient, and patience makes people angry. Needing to be patient makes people angry. If you're going to have to wait, people will start finding ways, even if that results in saying, well, I think he's wrong and it really is 10 times the price, and I think he's wrong. I really can research online, and I think he's wrong, and all these people who are financially incentivized to screw me over are actually looking out for me. They haven't met me, they have no obligation to me, they don't even know I exist, and yet I'm sure they're going out of their way to harm themselves to help me personally. And that framework in your mind allows you to then create a sense of urgency, which justifies skipping the patience, which people find extremely hard in most cases, and allows them to satisfy their desire to be impatient, to satisfy their desire to move forward and try to buy quickly, no matter how expensive it is, no matter how much they know they're going to lose money, no matter how much they know they're not going to make the right selection, they aren't going to get the right property, they may even put themselves in danger and not end up with anything at all. The power of being permitted to be impatient is an unbelievable psychological actor. And as someone who is surrounded by people who have extreme patience issues, I'm very acutely aware of just how much impatience can create disaster, and how people will feed it. And something I see even in my engineering work, I have engineers who, when you are like, oh, this is wrong, we have to not do this, once they realize that the work they wanted to do is about to be shown as being something they can't do, they will actually rush to do it. They've already processed the information in their brain that this can't be done, that is going to not work or whatever, but there's a desire to race to it. And people do this. It's a natural human reaction. It's an unfortunate one. It's part of that part of our brain we wish we could control, but we can't. So instead of trying to control something that's impossible to control, instead, control what you can control. Don't feed yourself misinformation. Don't set yourself up for these things. Be patient. And we all struggle with patience, right? Once we're window shopping for something, once we decide, someday I'm going to get a new car, well, pretty quickly that becomes I'm getting a new car, right? That desire speeds things up once we start window shopping for it. So you fix this not by magically being patient. You can't make yourself patient, but you can not set yourself up by looking at property, looking at websites, talking to real estate agents and so forth, and simply going, that's a thing for the future. I will not try to satisfy that craving now, because the craving is not to look at sites. The craving is to buy. And so if you feed yourself, it's like, I'm just going to taste this dessert. No, after a few little tastes, you're going to take a bite of that pie, and then you're going to eat 3 pieces. So don't lick the spoon thinking it's just a taste. It's not. It is just whetting your appetite for the thing you're trying to avoid. Anyway, I hope that this gives you a little bit of a framework for avoiding disaster, a little way to step back and think better about how you approach the things that seem benign but are anything but, and give you the power to hold off on home buying, land buying decisions. Be patient. Patience, especially when you're becoming an expat or are an expat, so important. You're at one of the worst possible times of your life to jump on big decisions. The expatry itself is such a big decision. Let that alone drive your desire for change and new things, hold off on everything else, and remember, internalize. By being patient, you're saving money, you're giving yourself more power. No matter what emotional draw buying property or more houses gives you, patience gives you logically whatever it is you wanted from that better, more. Right, so that's really logically where we want to be. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlMiller, or you can hit the join button right down there and join our channel here. Makes a huge difference, helps pay for the cameras and all the stuff that we use. We've been doing a lot of live streams recently. I'm very excited about adding more live streams into our workflow throughout the week. That seems to be very popular and working really well. Today is actually, we're putting this up on Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to the Americans. Happy birthday to my daughter, who is turning 17 today, which is why I'm not doing a live stream today as we normally do on Thursdays. We're taking this particular day off so I can spend it with my daughter. I will be heading to Managua tomorrow for the weekend and hanging out there, hopefully getting some filming done for you guys, but we've got plenty of episodes ready. And as always, get down in those comments and say hello. Go in the episode notes and you can get any way you need to contact me, how to send in a video of yourself, and so forth. And as always, I will see all of you tomorrow.